Good afternoon. Is everybody having a good JNUC? All right, like to hear it. So first off, I just want to do introductions. If you're in the right room, this is the scalability panel. So often we get a lot of questions about scaling, whether it's scaling of Jamf Pro specifically, or Jamf Pro Marketplace partners, or even just the Apple ecosystem as a whole. So we have a number of people that I consider to be experts in this space. I'm Todd Ebersviller. I'm the VP of Cloud and Delivery here at Jamf. So if you are a Jamf Cloud customer, you are running infrastructure in our cloud today, and I'm responsible for it. So with that said, I'm going to have each panelist go one by one, introduce themselves, explain who you are, your title, and a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is Chris Van Lobensells. I'm the general manager of OrgWiki. We are a product that's a company directory, and the main thing we do is we eliminate all the IT work behind distribution lists.
I need that. Aaron Woland, I'm a principal engineer with Cisco Advanced Threat Security. Let's see, my unofficial title is Cisco History Professor. I've been there a very long time, and I don't forget anything. And so if any of you have ever implemented any Cisco product, chances are I can help you with it. And a little bit about myself. So the one thing you need to know is I understand pain really well because I have 4 daughters.
My name is Yev. I'm a director of marketing at Backblaze, which is an online backup and cloud storage company. That's what I do. That's what we provide. It's very simple. Endpoint backups for Macs and PCs. I know less folks here on the PC side, but some folks have mixed environments. And then we also do cloud storage, similar to S3, but at a quarter of the cost.
Well, I'm Dave Suring. I'm a database administrator on the cloud and delivery team. So like Todd, I am responsible for the infrastructure that any of your Jamf Cloud instances are running on.
I am not John Hovland. I am sitting in for John Hovland. My name is Mike Paul. I'm a program manager for our subject matter experts team at Jamf, and just kind of get to work with a lot of the different teams, so I'm just here as kind of a catch-all.
What's your name on Slack?
Which Slack account? Mike.Paul.
All right, and if you guys did not hear or are watching the video, the question was, what's your name on Slack? So having said that, I really want this to be driven by the audience. So if you have any questions about scalability, you can come up to the microphones, wait in line. I'm going to go ahead and kick things off with a few questions, but I'd love to have a line formed if you want to ask anything at all about the product, the cloud, or anything related to scaling an Apple ecosystem. So the first one, I'm going to pick on Dave Suring because I watched last year's discussion, and a lot of the questions were ultimately focused on databases. And so I'm going to go to our senior DBA, who's the expert on this, and just ask, what's the story with my ISAM and InnoDB? There's a lot of talk at Jamf in terms of what should be used. What's the story from your perspective?
Yeah, so a lot of you may have already run into some of this and converted to InnoDB as part of the changes coming for 10.9. But one of the big changes there is just in how MySQL handles locking. So with my ISAM, everything is done at a table level, which means that for any query coming in, there's only going to be one insert, update, or delete happening at a time. When you have hundreds or thousands of devices all trying to do inventory updates, anything like that, you end up with queues forming, and things can become very slow, get blocked. A lot of bad news there. On the InnoDB side, that all happens at the row level. So you end up with a lot more concurrency and being able to really just have them all update at the same time. That's kind of on the performance end. When you look at just even the background processes in MySQL, InnoDB is built with a lot of crash recovery and protection just kind of built into the engine. So you get a much more resilient database storage layer as a result as well.
So as a customer, why do they care what it is?
As a customer, you want your data protected as best as it can be. So you want your best performance. You want to make sure that if for some reason your server crashes, you're not going to lose data. And yeah, I mean, it's
Sounds good. And I'm going to ask the next question for our John Hovland impersonator here. Could you tell me a little about some of the changes that have been made to improve database performance and what's been done in that space?
So there's been some really interesting work being done by a couple of the development teams, and John's team in particular has identified some known problem points. One being database size and the amount of stuff we retain. In particular, the applications table and the application usage logs. You might see that that is large. There is some work coming that we're hoping should be in 10.9 that we're going to actually see, depending on your database size and other stuff, we could see up to a 40% database reduction size around those things. So we're starting with applications, application usage logs. Once we see the gains there, we will move on to some other areas as well, but those are known problem points. So in 10.9, don't freak out if your database gets a lot smaller. It's a good thing. And you'll see benefit gained from during upgrades, during backups, during all these other things with this database reduction size. Another big project that team has been working on is figuring out how to handle the massive amount of commands coming in, how we batch and how we actually process those things. Through some different improvements, we found some ways to actually optimize that. Rough math that we were seeing for like for 100,000 inserts into the database, it was taking about 100 seconds before. We're now seeing that drop down to about 13 seconds. So the more commands we can handle quickly means the more things we can get done quickly, means the quicker we can respond back to devices and have that go. So those are some pretty big important things that we're seeing coming in 10.9, but we're going to be seeing things coming up to there. And also his team is doing a lot of the work that they're going to keep focusing on. How do we handle what is called the thundering herd and some of these other things a lot easier going forward?
Excellent. And as a reminder, if you have questions, please come up to the microphones. I'd love to answer your questions before asking my own. Yes, let's go right ahead.
Hi, since we're on the MySQL database thing of Jamf, it's probably our only single point of failure. I'd like it not be a single point of failure. We were load balancing, for instance, our Jamf Pro servers, but we can't, as far as I know, load balance or split or somehow mirror our MySQL databases. Do you know? Could you talk about that, please?
Yeah, and so on the database side, with MySQL, there's not a lot of good ways to be able to do kind of an active-active type of cluster. However, you can still make it not a single point of failure by using MySQL replication to actually just kind of have a mirror image of your database standing by. So if your master server goes down, there's some technologies you can use to help automate that failover process, but you can actually promote that replication box to your master and just start using that one. So instead of having an hours-long outage or the risk of just losing your data entirely, you can turn that into maybe seconds or minutes, depending on how much you want to actually automate around that.
What are some of the things that we gain with NODB and RDS and Amazon with the Jamf Cloud? You guys are leveraging that for some of the benefits there too.
Yeah, on NODB, there's not a lot that we gain from the high availability side. There really aren't much for features to that end that we wouldn't have with MyISAM as well. Specifically with RDS, if you're hosting in Amazon, and I know that Azure and I think Google both have flavors of this themselves, but in Amazon they have a multi-AZ instance that you can have. So that's kind of again, a hot backup, so to speak, of the server that they're using disk replication to provide that. But if that fails, the primary server fails, it'll move your DNS endpoint over to the secondary, restart the service to get everything up and running. And I think that's between 30 seconds to 2 minutes in real life.
We're on premises, so do you have a sort of something I can Google easily to get me started on the replication?
The question here was, we're on premise. Is there something that I can Google or look at to understand this better?
Yeah, so I mean, just to start with MySQL replication itself, if you put that into a Google search, will get you to all of MySQL's documentation about setting that up. It's a very common practice out there, so there's a lot of good information just at that level, and to be able to set up a manual cluster on your own. I'm not certain of what I would suggest for automating that at this point, though.
Does anybody else on the panel want to discuss scaling workloads, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, kind of what you do and what your strategy is? I'll take that as a no, and we can go to the next question. I think Dave answered it well.
Okay, this is going to follow up on what they were talking about with the conversion to InnoDB. I have the article here on Jamf Nation in front of me that talks about the conversion process. And one thing I was troubled with in the article, other than the buffer pool size, which you guys recommended be roughly 70% of the total system memory here, I really didn't have, when I was doing the conversion, I really didn't have a lot of intelligence in determining what the values were for, say, the key buffer size, the flush log at transaction commit, or the InnoDB file per table setting, and how it might apply to a clustered environment. By the way, I'm also on-prem. We've got a 5-member cluster.
Yeah. So I guess just to kind of jump to the, for the InnoDB buffer pool size, I guess I'll tackle that piece of it first.
Okay.
One caveat that I want to throw out there is that 70% setting is really if you're doing a dedicated database server.
Okay, we are actually.
And so if you're doing a dedicated server, 70% is a good starting point for that. If you're not doing a dedicated database server, then you need to be also considering your Java memory, or if you're running antivirus services out there, just all the other services that are going to use memory. And then you're going to have to reduce from that 70% point from there. With the other settings that you're looking at, so key buffer size is really a MyISAM configuration.
Okay.
Once we're converted over to InnoDB, there are a couple of MySQL system tables that need to use that, but otherwise you can set that very low, probably down to, I think the default is 16 meg.
Yeah, I saw that, and that's what I accepted for lack of knowledge.
Yep, and that's a perfect setting once we're all converted over.
Okay.
The file per table size setting is used to tell MySQL that each InnoDB table should have a separate file on disk. By default, what MySQL is going to do is have them all in just one giant, what they call table space. And the problem that you run into if you have it configured that way is, and I'm sure many people have run into this before, where if you have a policy that kind of runs away on you, your database size can just kind of grow huge, right?
Yeah.
When it's all in that one table space, once that disk is used, there's no way to get it back through, without doing some kind of nuclear options where you're actually deleting that stuff off of disk manually. The file per table option would let you actually do an optimize against that table, just like you would in MyISAM, where you can reclaim some of that disk space then once you fix the issue. And I think there was one more setting in there that we were.
Well, I read off, I think it's buffer pool, key buffer, flush log, and file per table.
Yep. The final one, the flush log at transaction commit, normally you would want that set to 1. That's going to be the default setting, and that's going to be kind of the most resilient against a crash. If you're running into problems with I/O, where you're seeing that on your disks, there's just a lot of I/O, a lot of thrashing there, you can play with that setting and set it to 0, which tells MySQL not to flush stuff to disk as frequently.
Okay.
And then the cost of that is when you set it to 0, I want to say it will do it at a minimum once every second. So there's a chance that you could lose up to a second's worth of queries in a crash. Not a huge thing, but for some people it may be undesirable.
Well, having been through CJA, I mean, I hated just accepting the defaults randomly, especially not knowing if, this applies to a cluster. And I think you guys hit the nail on the head. I mean, you explained to me what that is, or what these settings are, and I think that answers my question.
Good question. Next.
Sorry, terrible at names. Guy in the green.
David?
David. Okay, cool. Follow up on the MultiEasy RDS topic that came up a second ago. So when you go to convert a non-multi-AZ to a multi-AZ, you get a big nasty warning in the AWS console saying that speed is going to get hit really bad. Do you guys run multi-AZ in Jamf Cloud or no? Have you done speed tests to compare the two?
Yeah, we do run multi-AZ, and I think the cost that you're actually seeing there isn't a performance that's a difference between multi-AZ and single AZ, but a cost during the conversion process, because it actually then has to take that disk and replicate that stuff over to...
That warning is not clear. Okay, that's cool. I never knew that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then a more general question for the Jamf Cloud people. Have you guys ever considered, okay, we run in AWS, but it's our own AWS because we have to. We would love to use Jamf Cloud, but we can't. So have you guys on the cloud team ever considered writing a best practices paper for customers like us that need to use AWS in our own instance? I mean, when we were first rolling out like 2 years ago, or first going to AWS 2 years ago, just hunting down something stupid like what the cookie name is for stickiness, which is JSession ID, by the way. You know, we had to go all the way up to Sam Fortuna to find the answer to that. And we got it, which was great, you know, going through our Scott Seacrest and our whole channel, finally got to Sam and back. But it'd be so nice to just have something at your fingertips, a best practices guide for cloud, if you're doing it yourself.
I think that's a great question. Actually, I would love to see more of these questions come in too, because I think a lot of MSPs have similar questions about how do you do it for Jamf Cloud. And we are absolutely happy to have those conversations to share more insights into what we do, because at the end of the day, we want you and your companies to be successful at Apple. And if we can do that by sharing more about how we do things in Jamf Cloud, we're open to doing so. But we have to kind of understand what some of the asks are, because we have a very custom and heavily tuned environment for the kind of workload that we have, and yours might be a little bit different. Would you add anything else?
I'd be willing to throw out the offer to, like, if somebody wanted to reach out to me and throw some of the questions, other stuff, and I can help work with some teams to gather and maybe work on a knowledge base article or something along those lines. I can't answer those questions, but if you throw them at me, I can go talk to people smarter than me.
Excellent.
So this question is going to be at Mike Paul, since he was the one who brought it up. So in 10.9, you mentioned that there's going to be some database changes that's going to make our database smaller and more responsive, which I love. That's fantastic. I have a 40 gig database for my 18,000 clients. I will always be happy to see that go smaller. Is there going to be any description of how that conversion process is expected to behave? And the reason why I'm asking this, to give some context, is that for my 10.7.1 upgrade, I'm running an RDS. I had a 60 gigabyte volume for my RDS disk space. And when it hit my applications table, it was like, oh, 18.29 gigs. And that's when I saw my disk space start to go, because it was backing up the table. And fortunately, RDS let me resize on the fly, so I doubled it to 120 gigs. But if I hadn't been watching RDS disk space go down like a rocket, I would have run out of space. And when you run out of space, bad things happen. So a description of how this database conversion is expected to work, especially expected disk space needs, additional disk space needs, would be extremely appreciated, at least from me.
Great question.
I know that there is work on better communication there. I responded to you immediately on Slack when I saw you posting that, and I was immediately also pinging the people at Jamf, because I was under the impression we were going to be trying to do warning. I know we have discussions with that. We do plan to inform you more on the changes and those impacts for these upgrades, whether longer time needed or more disk space needed or some of those other things there. Sorry you ran into it. Good job catching that. But yeah, we do have notes that we would like to give you warnings, both in the release notes and other parts, about these changes to give you a little more heads up.
Yeah, the reason is that normally I expect to catch things like this in test, but in test I have 18 machines, so my applications table was nothing. So it took like 5 seconds to convert it, and I didn't even notice the additional space.
Yeah, I was asking in the beta forum and some other places prior to have people actually upgrade, do the test upgrade to give me some numbers on this. And everyone I reached out to, their test environment was not an actual replication of their production environment, so no one could actually give me any numbers of the impact that they saw.
Yeah, mine is as close to production as I can make it, but I can't make it have 18,000 machines. Well, I guess I could, but that would be a lot more work.
Yep.
So that's my feedback.
Better communication and warning prior to these upgrades if we are doing these impacts.
Yeah, especially if it is expected to take longer or need significantly more disk space, because I had budgeted an hour for my upgrade, and it wound up taking, like, I think 3.
I will make sure that I work with the TechCom teams to find ways to disseminate that out there, because we work on the betas and the internal documentation before it comes public. So.
Okay, thank you.
That's another excellent question, and actually just a quick kudos for having proper monitoring. If you want to ask monitoring-related questions to the scalability panel, I think that is a great topic. The fact that you had an alert, you acted quickly, that's fantastic. The only other plug that I'll give, and this is an obligated plug, as the head of cloud and delivery, if you let Jamf Cloud manage your instance, we have to worry about it. And we have a team very focused on it with great tools too. So
well, we're putting our iOS management into Jamf Cloud, so very shortly you will have to worry about this for us.
Sounds great. All right, next question.
I can add anecdotally, just in terms of the width and breadth of people staging environments to like production environments. So we have tens of thousands of servers, right? Backblaze has 700 petabytes of data under management. And so when we're running tests on some machines in staging, we have to be really careful about like what that means once we deploy it to the whole fleet. So just from like a sysadmin perspective, I empathize with both of you.
Great.
All right, I'm going to say that I'm here from a strategic perspective, so maybe a less technical question. But we currently are looking at standing up a second instance of Jamf and are evaluating whether or not to utilize a Jamf cloud or like host it on-prem. And one of our business requirements seems to be pushing us in one direction. Specifically, the business wants to be able to set permissions based off of a user location. So for example, when they're at the business, we want to be able to shut off the camera specifically because we want to shut off the microphone, right? We want to eliminate recordings. And my understanding is that I can't do that if I'm in Jamf Cloud. I can't use iBeacons. But then I started wondering if we could do something such as based on GPS or IP location, things like that, to get me the same result, but still being up on Jamf Cloud. How are you guys doing it? Because it's one thing, I'm starting this as a pilot in one location, but ultimately could be US-wide, and then trying to manage, physical devices at lots of locations with non-technical people sort of scares me. So I'd rather like a technical solution if we could have one.
I mean, the IP ranges are definitely means to do these things. There's variances. It depends on your network setup. Again, for a lot of those things to actually, if your network is actually set up, structured, that you can know these IP ranges are your network, then we can have some more granular control of where we define things. I'm not sure of a reason or limitation why iBeacons wouldn't work with Jamf Cloud, but I will just say iBeacons in general you have a bunch of dependencies, like you're required to have Bluetooth on and some of these other factors that end users have control over disabling. So in general, I would not rely on iBeacons as a security means. I would only leverage iBeacons as a response to help people enable things, not as a restrictive way, because there's a bunch of means for end users to negate the power of iBeacons.
So as the representative from a network company up here, I have a question. What networking is it?
What do you mean, what networking is it?
Meaning, so
I'm putting these people on a guest network.
I'm sorry, say again?
I'm putting these devices on a guest network.
Okay. So
But it's enterprise-wide, but it's a guest network.
No, I get it. So the reason why I asked that is I said I was a history professor. So, with location services, and this is with, traditional Cisco wireless networks using wireless LAN controller, or even Meraki, who somehow, some way, someday will be a Cisco company. I think we acquired them a few years ago. They don't act like it, but their environment as well, right? The network actually has the location services. And we actually do have, you know, in a modern network, which everyone loves to call software-defined network, there's lots of API calls. Jamf also has some phenomenal APIs, right? So there may be a better synergy there of leveraging location services on the network, right, to give you within a few meter, range. I do this at a certain oddly shaped building in a certain area of the country, right? So if you, if you get anywhere near certain areas, we have to shut off things like cameras and things like that as well.
Correct. I also work for maybe an organization similar to that.
I'm sorry, I'm deaf. Even with your microphone, I can barely hear you.
Right. I'm in a similar situation to
Right.
some oddly shaped building
Okay.
in an unknown location.
God.
Okay, thanks.
But yeah, that's a good point. Network would probably be a really good way to accomplish that. If you are on this network, you control those things. Now, phones on cellular, other stuff, but you could do that carrot and the stick. You don't have access if you don't have these things, and you kind of disable things other ways. I don't know if there's means to work with an app developer to have maybe some integrations with that too.
But I wouldn't have that if I used iBeacon anyway, if they were going over cellular, right?
If you're going cellular, we're not going to get the network.
Well, I guess
or
in
the
my
IP.
situation, if they're cellular, I'm not managing them.
Okay.
Could block
Because I'm not giving them
That's the
cellular.
next thing I was going to say too,
Yeah.
is in a lot of those environments, they actually use DAS, so distributed antenna systems, which then gives them a better idea of the proximity of your physical device as well, right? So that's another option to be looking at also, right? Or literally cellular jammers enforcing you on their network.
Great. Next question.
Well, I hesitate to ask again. I made sure she got a chance first. One thing I'd be interested in seeing, and I've already put a feature request in on Jamf Nation, being with all the love you guys are showing for Microsoft services and Azure and whatnot, why don't I see the ability yet to maybe use, say, an Azure distribution point for Jamf Pro? Like an official supported Azure distribution point, or maybe some guidance on how we might host a Jamf Pro instance in Azure. For our case, school districts get Azure at a very discounted rate, and I can't necessarily afford to go Amazon, but I've got Azure sitting there and admins trying to find good uses for it, and I'm willing to at least throw out a feature request for it. I don't know if I'll ever see it.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and I think the answer from my perspective is it kind of depends on the customer and what the customer's needs are. Some might prefer GCP, some might prefer Azure. Today, because Jamf Cloud is in AWS, we do everything directly in that ecosystem, and that's why like the Jamf Cloud distribution service is housed there. Often we want to better understand why do you need it in one place versus another, and can we solve that in a different way? But I think we've heard a few of those feature requests come through. I haven't looked at it recently to see how highly upvoted it is, but we do occasionally get that. But after engaging with the customer, we can sometimes find other workarounds to help unblock them immediately.
Well, like in our case, I want to start being, we host on-prem right now, and I would like to find some way to provide more actual packages and policies to run off campus instead of having a lot of our stuff run or off campus instead of having things just run on. Now, I tried doing my own roll your own Azure SMB web dev out there, and it's definitely not perfect, but I would love to see a more supported solution other than, me try to run my own. It's either that or put a distribution point in the DMZ, and I'm not terribly excited about the thought
So
of that.
it kind of sounds like in your case, you wish that Jamf Cloud distribution, that service
That you
was
could
available
choose.
for you on an on-prem basis, or that you could do a cloud DP of the provider of your choice.
Yeah, as
Either of
opposed
those
to
would
just
meet your
Amazon.
needs. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement, yes. I'd
Okay.
want to choose maybe more than just Amazon as a cloud provider.
Got it. I think those might be separate feature requests that are
Okay.
out there right now and tracked separately. We can follow up after we're done here and kind of dig into it.
Sounds perfect.
But it's possible that one might get to market sooner than the other to help you.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry to go again. Quick question for the Backblaze guy, and then a question for everybody else. Favorite tools for performance tuning for storage and network?
You're talking for the B2 cloud?
No, maybe, like stuff that you guys like to use.
Oh,
Your house under the hood.
what we do? So we may not follow best practice. Let me state that out the gate. Our sysadmin and network teams roll a lot of their own tools. So the way that Backblaze started was consumer level backup. We then went into cloud storage. So instead of dropping in high performance servers from the beginning, ours were very dumb, like NAS boxes essentially, that we built ourselves. So a lot of the tools that we run to figure out like how they're behaving are stuff that we scripted on our own. The royal we, not me. And so that kind of has scaled as we've gone on. So a lot of we use like a canary system that we built ourselves that's tied into Grafana. So we're constantly pinging our own APIs, making sure that they're reporting back every couple seconds. Grafana draws a chart for us. They're just a pretty chart maker. I'm sure most of you are familiar with them. And then from there, if anything dips below like a 99.999 threshold, we get alerted, and then that kind of like wakes us up. I'm on the wake-up call list, so while I don't know what wakes me up in the middle of the night, sometimes I get a text message saying, Yev, wake up, you should take a look at Twitter and make sure that it's not on fire. That's typically what happens. Usually it's nothing and it's a false positive, but that's kind of how we do it. We built our own monitoring system essentially in the form of the canary, and that's how we roll. Now, is that sustainable forever? Definitely not, but we haven't made the jump yet because we've been able to manage it on our own. Terrible answer for you because it gives you no guidance whatsoever.
It's a
but
concept, so.
Yeah.
Package distribution, age-old problem. So, I mean, if I had it my way, we would just use our Cloud DP for everything. But when you do that, you have WAN engineers running down the hall with whips and chains hunting you down. So that doesn't work out too well. So we're still doing the traditional SMB shares spread throughout the company, and then cloud when you're off-prem or your IP range doesn't match anything in your network segments. But is there anything that does Backblaze thinking about a solution, or anybody else thinking about a solution that's maybe like a JDS in concept but actually work?
I would have no guidance for you on that either, unfortunately.
I do have a thought there because another really large retailer we help with that. And it doesn't have to be Cisco. There's actually other ones too. But have you looked at WAN optimization services, where basically it's the file ends up being cached basically at a router or a device near the router, so that when it comes down, it only comes down once. Right? And then when someone else goes to pull that file down, it lies.
So we have web caching on our network now, but it only works for HTTP, not HTTPS.
Not web cache. This has to be a WAN optimization service, right? Okay. So I don't want to mention competitor names, but like Riverbed or Cisco, right? I mean, we have our own as well, right? We call it WAS, but these things have been tremendously helpful at a lot of these places, especially retail, where they've got hundreds to thousands of locations with the smallest circuits you've ever even heard of for their WAN links, right? And so, having devices all come down from anywhere other than a local distribution point is harsh, and they don't want to put local distribution points in 7,000 stores. Right?
So there are appliances that sit in a network closet?
There are appliances that it actually can even be in your router, right? Literally even in the WAN router, yeah. It's something you may want to look at.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Right.
Next question.
Something.
I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the changes that are coming to the applications table or any other of the tables that, like, how is it going to be shrinking at upgrade? Like, what kind of changes are coming that are causing that?
Well, if you've looked in there, you might realize that we keep redundant copies when we don't have to. So the idea is to get rid of those and look more at the delta changes for that. We don't need 100,000 copies of the same entry. We can have one and point everything to that and use that, just better linking of the data in there.
So is that kind of like a change to the schema of that table, so it's not always tying to a report ID then? Is that basically what's going to be?
I can't speak to the exact changes that that those guys have been working on, but yeah, I mean it's a normalization technique. So what you're going to have is the applications table, I think, is probably getting broken up into 2 tables. So you're still going to have kind of the traditional linking of an individual report came in and here's the applications that were on it. But instead of it actually listing out /applications Outlook or something like that 100,000 times for each report that you put in there, that's going to link back to an ID that references that same path for any submission that comes in, whether that's my machine, Mikey's machine, anything like that. So what we're doing is eliminating all that duplicate data. You still have all the same linkings, you still have all the same ability to see what was on that machine during a given reporting period, but the duplicated data is gone.
Okay. So look for a new table and look to see how it changes the names to identifiers. Okay, thanks.
I have a general question that I think applies to every Jamf Pro customer. What is the optimal frequency for check-ins using the Jamf agent?
You just looked like you had a lot of...
So who are you asking?
Anybody is welcome to answer
No.
this.
I mean, like, from what perspective? Optimal meaning best security posture, or optimal meaning best for performance and response?
That is a great question. The call out from the audience was security.
So the optimal one for security would be to never lose the connection at all, right? Sew up a TCP session and leave it there at all times, and that is impossible. It's not practical, right? So one of the things that the world is coming to realize is that a real-time posture assessment of especially a mobile platform, and by mobile I mean laptop and or iPhone, iPad, etc., is just something we're not going to be able to have necessarily, right? So it's a matter of finding that sweet spot of how quickly can I have it poll to keep my information up to date and be willing to accept that as my window of risk.
I love the odds that exist on stage here. So I'm now going to go to the operational side of the DBA and say, from your perspective, you've got the security real-time need versus kind of the back-end management impact that it has. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I guess I'd be kind of a similar perspective. I mean, the more frequent that you can have it run, the better that it's going to be. Now, when you look at the Jamf check-ins, the check-in process itself is really lightweight. There's not a whole lot that happens there. And it's not a ton of work. So having your devices simply check in isn't what the problem is. It's when you have workflows that are going to be running policies on every check-in, or submitting inventory, doing installs. That really is where that overhead comes from. So there's a balance there between setting it very frequent and understanding what your workflows are to know that maybe you have something that's accidentally submitting inventory every 5 minutes on every device, and it doesn't need to be. And by fixing those workflows, you can actually have your devices checking in more frequently and seeing better security out of that then.
Along the lines of trying to meet the happy medium there, check-ins, again, aren't solving the problem. You're not answering your question. You're not getting the other things. We need the data. A reason why I added some challenges to the CCE course, the 400, a while ago, to try to kind of tackle this concept. And one thing I was trying to push people to think around is, if you have these high security needs that you need to know real time this thing changed, Jamf is not built for that kind of process all the time, all the machines. One thing you could do is you could roll your own. You could have a launch daemon that runs a script at a very high frequency on your machine, and it's checking for that state. This is the known state I want. If it's not in this state, then you have it submit a recon, and then the work goes to Jamf to actually rectify it. So our computers are pretty beefy these days for end users. Offloading some of that work to your client computer is not a horrible idea, to have it checking itself, and then when it itself sees a problem, then you let the JS know. So if you see something, say something type idea. I just coined that.
Chris, I'm curious, on the OrgWiki side, how do you handle this trade-off of wanting real-time data versus having too much of an impact on the systems that you interface with? What is your approach?
So on for us on mobile, actually it's very much to the thing of looking at the trade-off between frequency and payload. So we have a mobile application that's a mobile directory that's on iOS and Android devices that has an entire company directory. It does caller ID. If anyone in your company calls you, their name shows up. But then also obviously that sensitive data, if that employee is deprovisioned, you want that device to go dead really quickly. And so when we reinflate from memory, when the app starts and stops, when we get a notification that there's an update to the data, we do that security check then, but that's a very lightweight check, right? And then the concurrency bit is more lazy loading. Like we will check for full syncs when we can, but when you actually look for someone's profile, we bring in things just in time so that we're not taking too much device resources or bandwidth resources.
Great, thank you. Rich, you've got a question?
It's more a comment on scaling in this regards. I mean, you can get away with certain things with 500 clients on a Jamf Pro server. That's a bad idea at 5,000, and you should be fired if you try it with 50,000. One thing that in our particular shop, we're not necessarily concerned about how frequency of check-ins. Ours is set at like 60 minutes. What we would like is to be able to run those check-ins like an inventory at every check-in, because that's what's actually providing our useful data back to us. And going back to the model of using your computer to do it, iOS doesn't really lend itself to that scripting idea. We're limited to MDM. We need to have those inventories being run from the Jamf Pro end. So you also have these differences in the platform on what capabilities you can offload to the individual endpoints, which is on the Mac side, you can offload a lot because there's the agent. But on the iOS side, what do you do?
You guys build a lot of apps. I'm just wondering if there would be any means to leverage some of your app developers that have something on the iOS device watching for those things that could trigger things?
Well, the problem there is that properly built iOS apps have a sandbox.
Yep.
So there is that issue. Ideally, they shouldn't be able to watch anything outside themselves. You can leverage MDM for certain things, but we're limited by what Apple allows.
Exactly. Yeah, on iOS, especially on iOS, and Apple's been moving this direction in macOS, right? It's trying to move to these lockdown frameworks further and further and further. And in some ways, it sounds wonderful, and in other ways, you're like, man, you're taking away a lot of power that we need, right? So So having an endpoint check itself, there's benefits and there's downsides to it, right? There are people at my company who will write scripts to try and shut Jamf off altogether, and then we're checking for it at VPN login because if the agent isn't running, you can't get on the VPN, right? If the agent isn't running, you shouldn't be on the wireless, and things like that because people are trying to shut it off. So if it's something they can shut off and having it check itself doesn't do you any good. There's also the whole, in the IETF, we call it the lying client problem, where, literally you have people writing malicious scripts to lie to the things that are checking on it, right? But it's still defense in depth because you're then throwing in the ability, you have to have a valid multi-factor authentication on top of that, so it's someone really, really wanting to lie to the system. But you can't get that near real time on iOS because of the way that it's locked down, right? Yeah. So if you write an app, you don't have the same visibility into what Jamf does when Jamf has that one and only key to the system because it is the MDM on that device, and you get one, and it's the only thing that can access those different levels within the device itself, and everything else is sandboxed.
Yeah.
Right? So I totally feel your pain on that too, and
Yeah, in our case, we have a security app that if someone removes it, we want to know about it fairly soon. But with the way inventories are set up, it could be a full day before we find out someone's removed it.
Yeah. As a side note to that, right? So Cisco Security Connector is one of the things that we're demoing. And one of the test subjects on that is my daughter. And so I threw it on, I supervised her iPhone, I threw that on there. I can see every time she, like right now, you can probably go to my demo booth, look at my umbrella dashboard and see that she's on Spotify, right? But, you know, I stopped getting data, and I'm like, what's going on with that? She's like, well, I uninstalled it. And I was like, well, and I was like, why did you uninstall it? Well, it wasn't working right, so I uninstalled your security app, and I was like, no, this is not good. So then I'm like, wait a minute, how can I not, and there's no way to stop an end user from uninstalling apps today on iOS.
No, yeah.
So
And the only thing you
my
can do is
request
if
to
you
all
notice
of
it's
you
missing,
is
put it
ask
back.
your
Yeah.
Apple your account teams to drive that feature in, right? Like, please, Apple, please, you know, help us lock down so that end users can't uninstall apps.
Double opt-out install
Right.
or uninstall.
Yeah, something like SIP for iOS where you just can't
Right.
get rid of it.
Right, because it's the same thing, right? You're waiting on that poll, you're waiting on that check-in with an inventory check so that you know the app is missing, so that Jamf will then go push that app back down, right? And it's sometimes longer than you want.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for your questions, and I'd like to thank everybody on the panel. Afterwards, if you have any additional questions about scalability, I know we didn't get a lot of time to talk about monitoring, JMX, Memcache, you name it. I'm sure anybody on the panel would be happy to talk to you, but thank you all.
Thank you.